The woman yelled into the phone as she called 911, "I need you to get here immediately. This black kid is causing trouble." Her voice was firm, as if something serious had just happened. The teenager in question stood nearby, his eyes filled with confusion, unable to understand why he had suddenly become the center of attention, or why a storm was brewing around him. Suddenly, the screech of a luxurious car braking shattered the tense atmosphere, drawing all eyes. The city's mayor stepped out, her face filled with controlled fury. She looked directly at the woman and spoke in a voice as cold and sharp as a blade. "The troublemaker you're reporting is my son." In that moment, all of the woman's certainty crumbled. She realized she had made a terrible mistake, one that would not only change her life, but also leave a profound impact far beyond this small street corner. This shocking story not only exposed her personal prejudices, but also highlighted the deep-seated issues of racial bias and ingrained stereotypes in society. Before diving deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more thought-provoking stories like this. Jordan Parker, a 14-year-old black teenager, cherished quiet spaces. Cedarwood Park, with its towering oak trees, lush green lawns, and the gentle chirping of birds, was his go-to refuge whenever he needed an escape from the noise of life. That afternoon, Jordan chose his favorite spot under a large oak tree in the park's corner, where soft sunlight filtered through the thick foliage, casting sparkling patterns on the ground. Jordan had just finished a long day at school, where he often felt the weight of scrutinizing eyes. A dedicated student and avid reader, he tried to ignore the whispers and occasional jokes aimed at him. Today, he decided to enjoy a moment of peace before his mother, Evelyn Carter, arrived to pick him up. Evelyn wasn't just his mom. She was also the city's mayor, a strong, passionate woman who devoted herself to her work. Jordan was proud of her, but he also understood that her responsibilities often left little time for them to spend together. A gentle breeze swept through the park, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and wildflowers. Jordan closed his eyes, soaking in the tranquility. Unbeknownst to him, not far away, a middle-aged white woman named Sarah Wilson was watching him intently from a nearby bench. Sarah visited Cedarwood Park nearly every afternoon, using it as a place to relax and socialize with friends after a busy day. But today, her focus was entirely on Jordan. Something about his solitary presence under the tree felt unusual to her. Shaped by frequent news reports about crime, Sarah's mind began to race. A black kid sitting here alone? Who knows what he's up to, she thought, her suspicion growing with every passing moment. Jordan remained oblivious, enjoying his peaceful moment. But Sarah's gaze grew sharper. She recalled stories from the evening news, tales of incidents in other parts of the city. "I need to do something," she thought. Feeling a self-imposed duty to protect her community, Sarah stood up, adjusted her purse, and began walking toward the boy. Jordan noticed her as she approached. Looking up, he gave her a polite smile, assuming she might need directions or simply wanted to exchange pleasantries. But her expression was anything but friendly. It was a look of judgment, sharp and probing. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, her voice cold and authoritative. Jordan, taken aback by her tone, tried to stay calm. "I'm just waiting for my mom to pick me up," he replied softly but firmly. "I'm not doing anything wrong." Sarah crossed her arms, her lips pressed tightly as if doubting his words. "This park is for families," she said, her tone heavy with accusation. I don't know what you're up to, but I'm not going to let it happen." Jordan stepped back slightly, confused and uneasy about why a stranger was treating him this way. "I'm just sitting here, ma'am," he said, trying to defuse the situation. But his calm demeanor seemed to embolden Sarah further. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and began dialing. "You don't need to call the police," Jordan said quickly, raising his hands as if to show he had nothing to hide. "I'm not doing anything wrong. My mom will be here any minute." Sarah ignored his words. Bringing the phone to her ear, she spoke with unwavering confidence. 911, I'd like to report a suspicious teenager at Cedarwood Park," she said, her eyes fixed on Jordan as though he were a genuine threat. "He's been loitering here for a while. I feel unsafe." Jordan stood frozen, his heart pounding. A mix of helplessness and frustration surged within him. "Just because I'm a black kid, they think I'm doing something wrong," he thought, fighting back tears. He didn't know what else to do but stay still and wait. The piercing sound of police sirens shattered the tranquility of Cedarwood Park. 2 patrol cars with flashing red and blue lights sped into the area, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. People paused mid-stroll, curiosity sparking as they turned to see what was unfolding. A hush fell over the park as 2 officers stepped out of their vehicles, their authoritative strides radiating a sense of control. Jordan stared at the flashing lights, feeling as if every eye in the park was now focused on him. The officers, Miller and Grant, approached. Miller, a tall, middle-aged man with a stern face, led the way. Behind him was Grant, younger but equally alert, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for potential threats. They stopped in front of Jordan, their gazes cutting through him like lasers. Jordan took a deep breath, attempting to steady the rising fear within him. Sarah Wilson, emboldened by the officer's arrival, quickly stepped forward. "Officers," she began, her voice louder than necessary to ensure everyone heard her. "This boy has been loitering here all afternoon. I don't know what he's planning, but I don't feel safe. This is a family park." Jordan turned to Sarah, his eyes a mix of confusion and frustration. "I haven't done anything wrong," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm just waiting for my mom to pick me up." Officer Miller immediately interrupted. "We'll handle this," he said firmly. "You, stay still and keep your hands up." Jordan complied, raising his hands instinctively, a lesson his mother had instilled in him since he was a child. "Never give them a reason to think you're hiding something," she had always said. But the act of raising his hands cut deep into his pride. He couldn't understand why simply waiting for his mom in a park had turned him into a suspect. Sarah continued, her confidence growing. "He's very suspicious. I don't know who he's waiting for or what he's up to, but I don't feel safe," she reiterated, her voice directed at Officer Miller with a challenging edge. "Do you have any identification?" Officer Grant asked Jordan, his tone measured but his eyes scrutinizing. "I'm only 14, Jordan replied, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't have any ID, but my mom is on her way." The 2 officers exchanged a look. Miller's face hardened further as he gave a slight nod. "Don't move, kid," he said, his hand resting on the gun holstered at his side. Jordan's heart sank as he noticed the gesture, a wave of fear washing over him. Keeping his hands visible, Jordan focused on breathing slowly, trying to calm himself. But he could feel the tension mounting. It wasn't just the officer's suspicion he had to face. The growing crowd around them was also watching with a mix of curiosity and judgment. Some began recording the scene on their phones, while others stood frozen, unwilling to intervene. Jordan felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the edge of the park, steady and commanding. "Officers, may I say something?" The murmurs and whispers of the onlookers fell silent, and all eyes turned toward the source of the voice. It was Mrs. Alice, an elderly woman with neatly tied silver hair. She rose from a nearby bench, her slow but deliberate steps exuding confidence. Her sharp gaze cut through the tension as she addressed Officer Miller and Sarah directly. "I've been sitting here all afternoon," Mrs. Alice began, her voice clear and unwavering. "That boy hasn't done a single thing wrong. He's been sitting under that tree, enjoying the afternoon. If anyone's causing trouble here, it's certainly not him." Jordan, who had been looking down, consumed by the weight of the moment, lifted his head. His eyes met Mrs. Alice's, and for the first time since the ordeal began, he felt a warmth spread through him. Her presence was like a beacon of hope in the middle of this storm. But Mrs. Alice's words didn't immediately calm the situation. Sarah, the one who had called the police, frowned at the interruption. Feeling challenged, she turned to Mrs. Alice with forced composure. "You don't understand," Sarah said. "I'm just trying to keep the community safe." "Safe?" Mrs. Alice raised an eyebrow, her tone laced with irony. "Is this your definition of safety? Calling the police on a boy sitting quietly under a tree?" Sarah flushed, but pressed on. "I just thought, with everything going on lately, we can't be too careful. Everyone has to be vigilant." "Yes, we must be vigilant," Mrs. Alice interjected, her voice sharper now. "But vigilance doesn't mean fearing and targeting anyone who looks different from you. This boy is just a child. He hasn't done anything, yet you're determined to turn him into a threat." The crowd, initially silent, began murmuring again. Some nodded in agreement with Mrs. Alice, while others, still unsure of the full story, looked confused. A middle-aged man in a blue shirt spoke up. "She's right. I walked past earlier. That boy was just sitting there reading. He wasn't doing anything." A young woman pushing a stroller whispered to her companion, "This is ridiculous. How could anyone think a kid sitting quietly is a threat?" As voices of agreement grew louder, the sentiment in the crowd shifted. "We can't keep assuming the worst about people without any reason," one man said. "This kid doesn't deserve this." Jordan felt a new wave rising within him. Not just gratitude, but a renewed belief that he was not alone. However, Officer Miller, maintaining his neutral stance, remained silent, waiting for the situation to become clearer. Mrs. Alice, noticing the growing support from the crowd, stepped closer to Officer Miller. "This boy is a victim of prejudice," she said, her voice not only clear but also filled with emotion. "Officer, if people like her continue calling the police for reasons like this, I fear we'll lose the trust of this community." Officer Miller frowned slightly, as if deep in thought. He turned to Jordan, who was standing quietly, his eyes cast down. Then he looked at Sarah, who was now struggling to justify her actions. "I understand your concerns," Miller said to Sarah, his tone low and calm. "But in this case, I see no reason to suspect this boy of anything." Sarah fell silent, her eyes darting nervously around the crowd. She realized that the people around her were no longer on her side. A few cold stares settled on her, making her feel embarrassed and out of place. From behind the crowd, another woman stepped forward. It was Mrs. Ruth, an elderly resident who frequently walked in the park. Placing a gentle hand on Jordan's shoulder, she smiled warmly. "This boy's very polite," she said. "I see him almost every week. He's always carrying a book or a notebook, writing something. How could such a hard-working child ever be considered a threat?" Mrs. Ruth's words were the final straw. The crowd began to voice their agreement. "That's right," a man said. "We need to stop judging people based on their appearance." "This boy doesn't deserve to be treated this way," another added. Officer Miller, growing impatient, raised his hand to signal the crowd to be silent. "We're handling this situation," he said firmly. Then he turned to Jordan, his gaze unyielding. "Can you call your mother?" Jordan nodded. "My phone is in my backpack," he said, pointing toward the bag resting under the tree. But as he stepped forward to retrieve it, Officer Grant immediately held up a hand to stop him, his eyes wary. "Don't move too quickly," he said. "We'll get the backpack for you." Jordan stood motionless, a heavy fog of humiliation and helplessness engulfing him. The muffled whispers around him, the curious and pitying glances cast in his direction, only deepened the loneliness he felt. His small hands tightened into fists, his mind a whirlwind of confusion. He knew he was different from the other kids here, kids who always had parents arriving on time, parents who would protect them when things went wrong. He lowered his head, staring at his worn, scuffed shoes, feeling as though the entire world had turned its back on him. Part of him wanted to cry, but he held back. Crying would only make him look weaker in their eyes. "Mom will come," he whispered to himself as if trying to comfort his own heart. Yet time dragged on, each passing minute shrinking the flicker of hope inside him. He stole a glance around, searching for a familiar figure, but all he saw were other parents laughing and chatting with their children. A few kids cast glances his way, whispering to one another and giggling. Jordan felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but he pretended not to notice. He knew the teasing would never stop, and there was nothing he could do to make it go away. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, each moment of waiting feeling like an hour. Jordan tried to focus on happier thoughts, on the times his mom had shown up at the last minute, always with her radiant smile and a warm hug. But today, the silence around him amplified his doubts. Did Mom forget me? Is her work more important than mine? The thought pressed down on his chest like a heavy stone. The sounds around him began to fade into a dull hum. Jordan hardly registered what was happening until an unfamiliar noise shattered the silence, a deep rumble of an engine approaching from a distance. His head snapped up, his eyes filling with hope. In that instant, all the shame and helplessness evaporated, replaced by a surge of anticipation. A sleek black SUV rolled into the area, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Jordan felt his heart pounding wildly in his chest, as though it might burst. "Mom's here," he whispered, his voice small but brimming with trust and relief. Evelyn stepped out of the SUV, dressed in a tailored black suit that exuded authority and confidence. Her hair was neatly tied back, her sharp features framed with poise, and her eyes gleamed with resolute determination. She didn't need to say a word. Her mere presence transformed the atmosphere in Cedarwood Park entirely. Jordan's eyes lit up when he saw his mother, feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted from his chest. Yet he also sensed the gravity in her every step. She wasn't just angry. She was deeply hurt by the injustice inflicted on her son. Evelyn strode directly toward the crowd gathered around Jordan. The murmurs and whispers among the onlookers ceased instantly. Sarah Wilson, who had been brimming with confidence just moments before, instinctively stepped back, unease creeping across her face. Officers Miller and Grant stood frozen, visibly uncomfortable as they recognized that the woman approaching wasn't just the mother of the boy they were questioning. She was the mayor of the city. Evelyn's voice rang out, strong yet controlled, slicing through the stifling silence. "What is going on here? Why are you questioning my son in a public park?" Officer Miller cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "Mrs. Carter, we received a report about a suspicious individual. We're simply doing our duty." Evelyn fixed her gaze on him, her eyes cold and unyielding, leaving no room for evasion. "Who made the call?" she asked, her tone even but imbued with authority. Sarah, standing nearby, felt Evelyn's piercing eyes on her, as though they could see straight through her. She hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, her hands clenched tightly, her voice trembling. "It was me," she admitted. "I only wanted to ensure the community's safety. I saw this boy sitting here alone for too long without anyone with him, and I thought—" "You thought what?" Evelyn interrupted, her voice steady but weighted. "You thought that a black boy sitting quietly under a tree automatically became a threat? You thought his presence in this park made you feel unsafe?" Sarah stammered, her eyes darting away. No, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean it that way." "Really?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her tone growing sharper. "Then what exactly did you mean, Mrs. Wilson? Did it ever occur to you that your own biases led you to view my son as a criminal?" Sarah looked down, unable to muster a response. The crowd, now utterly silent, seemed to hold its collective breath, the weight of Evelyn's words pressing on everyone. Some began to nod in agreement, while others exchanged uneasy glances as if grappling with the realization of their preconceived notions. Evelyn locked eyes with the two officers, her gaze unwavering. She stepped forward, maintaining just enough distance to assert her authority while commanding the space. "I want to hear directly from you," she said, her voice steady and firm. "Explain to me. How do you assess this situation? Why do you believe my son, a 14-year-old sitting quietly under a tree, is suspicious enough to be interrogated like a criminal?" Officer Miller, the older of the two, cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. "Mrs. Carter," he began slowly, "we received a report of a suspicious individual. We can't ignore concerns about public safety. Our procedure requires us to investigate." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her tone dropping slightly, but it carried a sharp edge. "And does your procedure include treating someone as a threat based solely on their skin color? Or do you simply act on every baseless accusation without verification?" Officer Grant, the younger officer, attempted to interject, but his voice faltered under Evelyn's penetrating gaze. "We didn't mean to discriminate, Mrs. Carter. This situation was simply, we wanted to ensure there was no potential danger." "Potential danger?" Evelyn cut him off, her eyes sweeping over both officers. "Did you verify any evidence? Did you observe any disruptive behavior from my son? Or did you just accept the word of a woman you've never met?" Miller glanced down, visibly uncomfortable under her relentless questioning. "We were just following the procedure," he murmured. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly as if summoning strength to contain her rising anger. When she opened them, her focus shifted to Sarah, who now stood a few steps away, her once confident demeanor replaced by unease. "Mrs. Wilson," Evelyn said, her voice low but laden with gravity, "you're the one who called the police, aren't you?" Sarah nodded hesitantly, her eyes darting away. But Evelyn wouldn't let her evade the confrontation. Then I want you to explain, Evelyn continued. Why did you think my son was suspicious? What exactly did he do to make you feel unsafe? Sarah opened her mouth but couldn't form a response immediately. After several moments of hesitation, she stammered, I just thought, he was sitting there alone for so long. I didn't know what he was doing, and with everything I've seen on the news lately, I thought it was better to be cautious. Cautious? Evelyn's voice turned sharper, slicing through Sarah's weak explanation. You thought that a black boy sitting under a tree in a public park needed to be investigated by the police because of your caution? Did you ever stop to ask yourself why you felt unsafe? Sarah fumbled for words, her face flushing red. I didn't mean it that way. I wasn't trying to... Really? Evelyn raised her brow, her voice icy. Then, what did you mean, Mrs. Wilson? If my son were white, would you have made that call? Sarah's silence was deafening. She couldn't answer, and the weight of Evelyn's words pressed heavily on her. Memories from her past suddenly surged forward, flooding her thoughts. Years ago, Sarah's young daughter, Emily, had been abducted from a park. It was the most horrifying moment of her life, each passing second a torturous eternity. Though Emily had been found unharmed, the fear of that day never left her. Since then, Sarah had viewed the world through a lens of heightened vigilance. Anything out of place in her perception became a potential threat. And today, those lingering fears had driven her to make a grave mistake. I admit, Sarah said softly, her voice breaking. I let my fears cloud my judgment. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought I was protecting the community. Protecting the community? Evelyn repeated, her tone sharp with irony. You think you're protecting people by turning an innocent child into the target of your fear and prejudice? That's not protection, Mrs. Wilson. That's injustice. The crowd around them murmured, their perspectives shifting. Some cast Sarah critical looks, while others hung their heads, perhaps reflecting on their own biases. Evelyn turned back to the officers. And what about you? She asked, her voice cutting. If this were a white boy, would you have approached him with the same suspicion? Both officers remained silent, their gazes avoiding hers. Evelyn took another step forward, forcing them to confront her presence. I'm not letting this slide, she said, her voice ringing with authority. I will ensure that all of you and your entire police department receive proper training to eliminate these biases, and I expect real change, not just empty promises. Grant nodded reluctantly, clearly uneasy but unwilling to argue. Understood, Mrs. Carter. Evelyn's gaze softened slightly as she turned back to Sarah, though her tone remained firm. I hope you take the time to reflect on your actions. An apology isn't enough. If you truly care about this community, you need to change the way you perceive and treat others. Evelyn turned to face the crowd, her gaze sweeping across each face. Today, I stand before you not just as a mother, she said, her voice resolute and unwavering. I stand as the mayor of this city, and I cannot stand idly by as injustices like this continue to happen. She took a deep breath, the silence around her amplifying her words. My son, Jordan, is only 14 years old. He did nothing wrong and posed no danger. He was simply sitting here, waiting for me to pick him up. Yet, because of the color of his skin, because of baseless prejudice, he was perceived as a threat. This is not just an insult to my son. It is a reflection of a larger issue in our community. Some members of the crowd nodded in agreement, while others exchanged hesitant glances. A middle-aged man standing nearby muttered to his companion, "Do you think anything she says will change things?" Evelyn, sensing the skepticism, stepped forward, her gaze softening but still firm. "I know some of you may think this has nothing to do with you," she continued. "You might believe this is just an isolated incident, a misunderstanding. But I want you to look deeper. Ask yourselves, if this were your son or daughter, would you remain silent? If they were treated unfairly simply because of how they looked, could you accept that?" A voice rose from the back of the crowd. "But is there a way to change this?" It was Mr. Mark, a longtime resident of Cedarwood for over 30 years. "We've heard these promises before, but nothing ever seems to change." Evelyn nodded, not shying away from the challenge. "I'm not promising that change will come overnight, Mr. Mark," she replied, "but we must start somewhere. I'm announcing today that, beginning next week, the city will launch anti-bias training for all law enforcement and public service employees. This isn't the sole solution, but it is the first step toward understanding and addressing the biases we all carry." The crowd buzzed with murmurs, their reactions mixed. Some nodded in support, while others remained skeptical. Evelyn raised a hand, calling for attention. "But I can't do this alone," she said. "We will host public forums where everyone can share their stories, listen to others, and learn together. I urge you to participate. This isn't just the police's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the entire community." Jordan, standing beside his mother, felt a surge of emotion. He hesitated, but, encouraged by Evelyn's reassuring look, stepped forward to address the crowd. I don't know what to say," Jordan began, his voice trembling. "But today, I was really scared. I was just sitting here, waiting for my mom, and suddenly I was treated like I did something wrong, just because of my skin color." He paused, taking a moment to steady himself. "I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. I've heard stories about people like me, people who just want to live normal lives but are treated unfairly. It's not right, and I don't think anyone should have to feel that way." Jordan's words, though simple, struck a chord. A young woman in the crowd, Lisa, raised her hand. "Thank you, Jordan," she said. "What you've shared is so important. We need to hear stories like yours to truly understand what's happening." Evelyn stepped beside her son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Jordan," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "What you've said is a reminder to us all. This isn't just one person's problem. It's all of ours." She turned back to the crowd. "We may not be able to change everything in a day, but that doesn't mean we can't start. I urge all of you to participate. Share your stories, listen to others, and together, let's build a community where no one has to live in fear simply for being different." Applause rippled through the crowd, tentative at first but growing stronger. Evelyn knew the claps were just the beginning. The real work lay ahead. As she and Jordan prepared to leave, several residents stepped forward to shake her hand, expressing their support. Mrs. Alice, the woman who had first stood up for Jordan, approached and said, "Mayor Carter, I'm with you. We need to do this, and I'll be there." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Alice. I hope many others will follow your example." Jordan looked at his mother, his heart lighter than before. "Do you think things will change, Mom?" he asked. Evelyn paused, meeting her son's gaze with unwavering resolve. "Change is never easy, Jordan, But today, you helped spark it. We don't know how far this flame will spread, but I believe that if enough people join together to keep it alive, the darkness will begin to fade." As mother and son walked away from the park, leaving behind a crowd still murmuring and reflecting, the faint light of hope began to kindle in the hearts of those who had witnessed the moment. After the tense incident at the park, the story quickly spread throughout the city, sparking outrage across the community. Social media posts, letters of complaint from residents, and critical news articles put immense pressure on the police department. Faced with the escalating backlash, Chief Howard, a leader known for his integrity and accountability, launched an internal investigation to uncover the truth. The goal was not only to assign responsibility to the involved officers, but also to restore public trust in the police force. On a brisk morning in the police department's main conference room, a heavy atmosphere loomed over the long table. Bright, fluorescent lights illuminated the faces of 3 officers, Sarah, Miller, and Grant, seated at one end. Opposite them sat Chief Howard and members of the investigative panel, each equipped with thick folders containing reports, testimonies, and witness statements from the park incident. Sarah sat upright, her hands resting on the table, though her tense eyes betrayed her nerves. Beside her, Miller maintained a composed demeanor, his steady gaze fixed on the chief. At the far end, Grant seemed to shrink into his chair, gripping a pen tightly in an attempt to steady his anxiety. Chief Howard opened the meeting with a firm yet measured tone. "Thank you all for being here today. I don't need to remind you that the incident at the park last week has sparked significant controversy and negative reactions from the community. Our job now is to examine every detail of what happened to ensure future actions are guided by professionalism and sound judgment." He paused, flipping through the documents in front of him. "First, Officer Sarah, you were the one who initiated the police response at the park. I want to hear your reasoning directly." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Chief Howard," she began, her voice slightly shaky, "I received a call from a resident reporting suspicious behavior from a boy sitting under a tree. Given the current climate, I felt it was necessary to check the situation to ensure the area's safety." Howard tilted his head, his sharp eyes studying Sarah. "Suspicious behavior? According to your report, the boy was sitting and reading a book. What specifically made you think he was a threat?" Sarah flushed, her gaze faltering. I wasn't sure, but the caller was very concerned, and I thought it was better to act quickly to prevent any potential risk." Howard placed his pen down on the table, his expression hardening. "Did you assess the situation yourself before requesting backup, or did you rely solely on the word of an anonymous caller?" Sarah remained silent, unable to provide a satisfactory answer. The weight of her response deepened the tension in the room. Howard turned to Miller, seated beside Sarah. "Officer Miller, upon arriving at the scene, how did you assess the situation?" Miller maintained his composure, responding clearly. "Chief, when I arrived, I observed no signs that the boy posed any danger. I tried to remain calm, evaluate the situation objectively, and refrain from taking immediate action. I believed more information was needed before making any decisions." Howard nodded slightly, appearing satisfied with Miller's response. He jotted a few notes before shifting his attention to Grant. "Officer Grant, what is your assessment of how the situation was handled on site?" Grant, still clutching his pen, hesitated before replying, his voice uneven. I was just supporting Officer Sarah's directive. I didn't directly evaluate the situation. I thought my role was to assist my colleague. Howard raised an eyebrow, his tone growing sharper. How exactly did you assist? By standing idly without attempting to de-escalate the situation? Grant said nothing, his head lowered as his face turned crimson. Chief Howard leaned back in his chair, his voice slowing but carrying an unmistakable gravity. I've reviewed all the reports and witness accounts. What disappoints me most is the lack of professionalism and judgment exhibited by the officers at the scene, except for Miller, who showed restraint and proper conduct. Turning back to Sarah, his gaze was cold and unyielding. Calling the police without a clear reason, based solely on unsubstantiated fears, was an irresponsible decision. Not only did it harm the boy involved, but it also damaged the community's trust in us. He shifted his focus to Grant. And you, Officer Grant, your indecisiveness did nothing to defuse the situation. If you believed your colleague's actions were inappropriate, it was your duty to speak up. Grant kept his head down, unable to meet the chief's eyes. The tension in the room was palpable. One of the panel members broke the silence. Chief Howard, we've received significant feedback from the community about this incident. Many believe this isn't just a case of individual errors, but a symptom of deeper issues in how we handle similar situations. Howard nodded in agreement. That's correct. This isn't just about these 3 officers. It highlights the need to reevaluate our training and response protocols. Poor decisions like these cannot happen again. After over 2 hours of questioning and discussion, Howard concluded the meeting with authority. A thorough investigation will continue. Officers Sarah and Grant, you are suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Officer Miller, while your actions were not egregious, you will still be required to attend additional training sessions to improve your handling of sensitive situations. Standing, Howard cast a final look across the 3 officers. We are police officers. Our job is to protect, not to harm. I expect each of you to learn from this mistake. Sarah left the room with a shaken expression, while Grant hurried out, avoiding the eyes of others. Miller, though not suspended, appeared deep in thought, clearly burdened by the incident. News of the internal investigation quickly spread beyond the department, with the community closely monitoring the developments. Many residents expressed hope that this would be a turning point, urging the police force to adopt more equitable and humane practices. Meanwhile, Jordan, the boy wrongly suspected, gained widespread support. His mother, Evelyn Carter, actively attended community meetings, calling for systemic reforms and comprehensive training for officers, particularly in addressing implicit bias. For Sarah and Grant, the fallout was severe. They faced sharp criticism from colleagues and the public. While opportunities for redemption remained, their futures in law enforcement had never been more uncertain. A month after the internal investigation concluded, the incident at the park was brought to trial. The courtroom was tense, filled with a crowd that included Jordan's supporters, social activists, and city residents eager to witness the proceedings. Facing them were the 3 defendants, Sarah, Grant, and Miller, seated at the defense table with varying expressions. Sarah kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with those around her. Grant looked visibly nervous, while Miller maintained a calm but serious demeanor. On the plaintiff's side sat Evelyn Carter, Jordan's mother, alongside her son. Evelyn exuded confidence, her unwavering gaze fixed on the defendants. Jordan, sitting next to her, clutched her hand tightly, seeking comfort and reassurance. The prosecution was led by Linda Harper, a renowned attorney known for her fierce advocacy against police misconduct. She began her opening statement with conviction. "Your Honor, we are here today to shed light on an incident that should never have occurred. An innocent boy was subjected to unjust treatment and suspicion simply because of prejudice and the lack of professionalism by those entrusted with protecting our community. We are not just seeking justice for Jordan Carter, but also aiming to send a message that no one, not even law enforcement, is above accountability or the trust of the people they serve." Turning toward the defendants, Linda continued, "We will demonstrate that the actions of Officers Sarah and Grant were not only ethically wrong but also unlawful. Furthermore, we will address Officer Miller's failure to intervene sufficiently to prevent this situation from escalating." Jordan was the first to be called to the witness stand. Despite his young age, he displayed remarkable composure as he answered the prosecution's questions. "When the police arrived, how did you feel, Jordan?" Linda asked gently. Jordan looked down briefly before raising his head, his voice trembling but clear. "I felt really scared. I didn't understand why they thought I was suspicious. I was just sitting there, reading my book. I didn't do anything wrong." Evelyn's testimony was straightforward yet deeply emotional. "As a mother, it is unbearable to see my son treated this way," she said, her voice steady but charged with feeling. "These baseless prejudices put my child in a situation he should never have faced, causing him emotional harm that no child should endure. I hope this court delivers a fair verdict to ensure no other child has to experience what my son did." When it was Sarah's turn to testify, she stood with a trembling voice. "I didn't mean to harm the boy," she said. "I was just doing my duty, acting on the information I received from a concerned resident. If I made a mistake, I accept responsibility." Linda did not let the statement pass unchallenged. "You claim you were doing your duty, Officer Sarah, but were you aware that your actions were based on personal bias rather than concrete evidence?" she pressed. Sarah lowered her head, unable to respond. Grant admitted to his shortcomings when questioned. "I realize now that I should have intervened to prevent the situation from escalating. I regret my failure to act appropriately." When Miller, the only officer who refrained from making impulsive decisions, took the stand, he spoke with a measured but firm tone. "I did not agree with the approach taken by Officers Sarah and Grant at the scene. I tried to evaluate the situation objectively, but it's clear now that I should have done more to prevent things from going wrong. I deeply regret not doing enough to protect the boy." This testimony caused a stir in the courtroom. While Miller admitted his shortcomings, his words underscored that the negligence and prejudice of Sarah and Grant were the primary drivers of the incident. After hours of deliberation, the judge rose to deliver the verdict. He surveyed the courtroom, where everyone held their breath in anticipation. After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, the judge began, "This court finds that Officer Sarah acted irresponsibly, violating protocols in handling the situation and allowing personal bias to influence her judgment. Officer Grant failed to fulfill his duty to provide proper support, leading to unnecessary harm. Both are sentenced to a 2-year suspension and must complete mandatory training in bias awareness and sensitive situation management." Turning to Miller, the judge continued, "Officer Miller, while not directly involved in the misconduct, the court finds that you did not take sufficient action to prevent the escalation. You are required to undergo additional training and will receive a formal reprimand. Addressing the plaintiff, the judge concluded, "To the Carter family, the court orders the city police department to compensate Jordan Carter for emotional distress and reputational harm. Additionally, the department is mandated to implement comprehensive training programs to prevent similar incidents in the future." As the judge finished reading the verdict, a profound silence filled the room. For Evelyn and Jordan, the moment felt overwhelming, like a wave of emotions finally crashing over them. Jordan sat still, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, he didn't know how to feel. Fear, helplessness, anger, and shame, all these emotions had gripped him throughout the ordeal. But now, hearing the judge's fair decision, a sense of relief washed over him. Turning to his mother, his eyes glistened, not with sadness but with release. "Mom," Jordan whispered, his voice soft but full of emotion. "We won, didn't we?" Evelyn, the steadfast mother who had stood by him throughout, couldn't hold back her tears. A single drop rolled down her cheek, not of sorrow, but of pride and vindication. She turned to her son, squeezing his hand tightly. "Yes, sweetheart, justice has been served. You stood strong, and today you've earned this victory." Jordan bowed his head, his shoulders shaking lightly. He didn't cry loudly, but the tears streaming down his face were an outpouring of the frustration and pain he had held in for weeks. For the first time since the incident, Jordan felt recognized and respected as a person. "Mom," he murmured, "you always believed in me, didn't you?" Evelyn cupped his face, her eyes brimming with love. "I've always believed in you, Jordan. I knew you did nothing wrong, and I'm so proud of you for standing up, not just for yourself, but for every child who might face the same." Jordan nodded, a spark of determination lighting in his eyes. "I want to do something, Mom, so no one else has to go through this." Evelyn smiled, gently stroking his hair. "You will, Jordan, and we'll do it together." As they stepped out of the courthouse, the afternoon sun bathed the scene in warmth. Evelyn and Jordan walked side by side, their bond stronger than ever. Outside, a crowd of residents and reporters awaited them. When the pair emerged, applause erupted from those who had followed and supported their journey. Jordan hesitated, surprised by the cheers. Looking at the crowd, he no longer saw judgment or doubt, but recognition and encouragement. Evelyn leaned down, whispering to her son, "Do you see this, Jordan? This isn't just your victory. It's a victory for everyone who believes justice must prevail." Jordan smiled, his heart swelling with hope. Holding his mother's hand tighter, he silently vowed to face whatever lay ahead with the strength and confidence he had gained. The trial became a wake-up call for the entire city. It not only exposed flaws in law enforcement practices, but also ignited hope for a fairer justice system. With new training programs and growing awareness, the community began to believe they were on the right path toward creating an environment where everyone could feel respected and protected, no matter who they were. After the Cedarwood Park incident, Jordan felt as though he had crossed a major threshold in his life. His story not only heightened his community's awareness of injustice, but also set him on a new path, a journey to become an advocate for justice and social change. Returning to school in the days that followed, Jordan noticed changes, not only within himself, but also in the way he viewed the world around him. Jordan decided to join the school debate club, something he had never considered before. Initially, he joined as an experiment, not so much to win arguments but to find a platform to voice his story and reach more people. To his surprise, his experience, the injustice he had endured, resonated deeply with his peers. One afternoon, during an internal debate competition, Jordan chose to recount his story. No longer a hesitant boy, he had learned to confront his fears and speak about what had happened. As he described the moment when the police treated him unfairly because of his skin color and how his mother, Evelyn Carter, had appeared to defend him, his words rang with authenticity and power. "What I went through isn't just my story," Jordan said during his speech, his eyes shining with conviction. "Our whole community faces these issues. I was lucky to have my mother stand up for me, but how many others don't have that kind of protection?" Jordan's speech was more than a recounting of personal pain. It was a call to action against injustice. He spoke not only about the hurt, but also about hope, emphasizing the need to change mindsets. The room fell silent after his speech, and then applause erupted, not just for the quality of his delivery, but for the profound truths he had laid bare. One of his peers, Sarah, approached him after the event. "Thank you for sharing that," she said. "I can't imagine what it must have been like to go through something like that, but you've made me think differently about a lot of things." Jordan noticed a shift in the way people at school treated him. Some classmates reached out, expressing their interest in joining discussions on injustice and the community's role in combating prejudice. Jordan felt that while there was still much work to do, he had taken a significant first step. One day, after a debate session, Jordan was invited to the office of Mr. Daniels, his history teacher. Mr. Daniels was known for encouraging his students to think critically and express their views freely. As Jordan entered the room, Mr. Daniels regarded him with a look of encouragement. "Jordan," Mr. Daniels began, "I was deeply impressed by how you shared your story today. That story isn't just yours. It belongs to many people whose voices are often overlooked. Have you ever thought about using the power of words to share your story more widely?" Jordan, puzzled, asked, "What do you mean, sir?" Mr. Daniels smiled, his tone gentle but full of expectation. "Why not write an article for the school paper? Writing is a powerful way to spread your message and inspire positive change. What you shared today could be a source of inspiration for so many others. Would you be willing to try?" Jordan sat quietly for a moment, considering the suggestion. Writing for the school paper wasn't just about telling his story. It was an opportunity to make his voice heard across the school and beyond. He realized this could be a way to take the dialogue beyond the debate room and into the broader community. "I'll do it, sir," Jordan said, his voice resolute. "I'll write for the school paper. Thank you for believing in me." Mr. Daniels patted Jordan on the shoulder, his eyes filled with encouragement. "I know you'll do great. Write from your heart, Jordan. That's the only way to truly change minds." At home, Jordan sat down at his desk and began writing. He didn't just recount the events at Cedarwood Park. He described his emotions, what it felt like to be treated like a criminal because of his skin color. He wrote about the pain of injustice and the isolation he felt, but he also wrote about hope and the changes he wanted to see in society. Jordan's article was soon published on the front page of the school paper. His story captivated not only his classmates, but also teachers and even members of the local community. Students began approaching him, sharing how his story had made them reconsider how they treated others and viewed social differences. With every article he wrote and every time he shared his story, Jordan felt himself growing more mature. No longer just a teenager who had been hurt, he had become a voice for justice, someone fighting for a society free from discrimination. He was no longer alone in this battle, and more people were standing by his side each day. The realization that his story could help transform his community motivated Jordan to pursue his dream of becoming a social activist. He was determined to use his voice to help others understand the injustices that existed and the urgent need to create a fairer society. Jordan knew that the road ahead would be long, but he also understood that the steps he had already taken were an essential part of this change. In the days following Jordan's article in the school paper, his story resonated deeply across the Cedarwood community. Students, teachers, and even elderly residents began engaging in conversations about injustice and its impact on those around them. Jordan was no longer just a symbol of courage. He had ignited a collective sense of responsibility, a realization that change required more than one individual or one event. It demanded everyone's involvement. Meanwhile, Evelyn Carter remained steadfast in her efforts to push for meaningful reform, despite facing numerous obstacles. She knew that implementing anti-bias training for police and public servants was just the first step. Expanding her vision, she advocated for incorporating lessons on diversity and inclusion into the school curriculum. Educators were invited to workshops to learn how to instill respect for one another and a sense of social justice in their students. Not everyone supported these efforts. At a community meeting held in a local church, Evelyn addressed a mixed audience of supporters and skeptics. One middle-aged man stood up, his voice laced with frustration. "Mayor Carter, I don't think our city needs this much change. What you're doing seems like it's just to appease a small group of people. We've lived like this for so long and it's been fine." Evelyn paused, taking a deep breath as her gaze swept across the room of expectant faces. "I understand your concerns," she began, her voice steady and resolute. "Change is never easy. But let me ask you, and everyone here, if you've never experienced injustice, does that mean it doesn't exist? And if we know that some members of our community are suffering, can we truly say we've fulfilled our responsibilities as citizens?" The room fell silent. The skeptics seemed to falter, their arguments losing ground, while supporters nodded in agreement. Evelyn pressed on. "We don't live just for ourselves. We live for the next generation. If we don't teach our children to respect differences, if we don't create a fairer community, what kind of legacy are we leaving behind?" While Evelyn fought for change on the political front, Jordan was making his impact through smaller, meaningful actions. One afternoon, during a discussion with his debate club friends, an idea struck him: a mural in Cedarwood Park, the very site of the incident. "We need something that doesn't just remind us of the past," Jordan said, his eyes lighting up. "It should also be a symbol of unity and hope for the future." The group quickly rallied behind the idea. They began sketching designs and seeking permission from the school and city officials. When Evelyn heard about her son's plan, her pride was evident. "You're doing something truly special, Jordan," she said, taking his hand. "I'll do everything I can to help you make this happen." In the weeks that followed, Jordan and his friends worked tirelessly. They reached out to the community, and, their surprise, many were eager to contribute. Local artists, students, and ordinary residents joined the effort. The mural slowly took shape, interlocking hands of different colors symbolizing diversity, encircled by a ring of peace. At the center of the mural, bold letters read, "Diversity is strength, unity is the future." Throughout the process, Jordan felt an overwhelming sense of connection, An elderly woman stopped by one day, gazing at the mural before turning to Jordan. "Thank you," she said softly. "This is what Cedarwood needed. You've given us hope again." When the mural was completed, a small dedication ceremony was held at the park. Residents from across the city gathered: families, students, teachers, and even police officers. Evelyn, dressed simply but radiating confidence, stepped up to the podium. Her voice carried clearly through the park. "Today, we are not just unveiling a mural. We are unveiling a symbol of change. This is a reminder that we, as a community, can do better. We can face the past, correct our mistakes, and build a future where everyone feels respected." Jordan was also invited to speak. As he approached the podium, he felt a mix of pride and humility. "We started this mural to turn this place, which once brought fear to me, into a symbol of hope," he began. "Hope that no one in this community, or anywhere else, has to go through what I did. And hope that we can come together to create a better world." Applause rippled through the park, and in that moment, Evelyn felt that every effort she had made, every battle she had fought, was worth it. She stepped down from the podium and embraced her son tightly. "You've accomplished so much, Jordan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never been prouder of you." Jordan smiled, leaning into his mother's embrace. "I'm just doing what you taught me, Mom. But do you think we can change things?" Evelyn pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "Change is never easy, and it doesn't happen all at once. But every small step we take matters. You've lit a spark of hope, and if we all keep moving forward, that spark will grow into a flame." Under the warm glow of the setting sun, Evelyn and Jordan stood before the mural, admiring their collective achievement. The mural shone brightly, like a beacon of hope, not just for Cedarwood, but for the dream of a fairer future. Evelyn and Jordan's story became more than just a reminder of injustice. It was an inspiration, a testament to the power of unity and hope. What small steps can we take to build a fairer society? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If this story resonates with you and you believe its message should be shared, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, let's be the change.